Hello everyone, my name is Ian McNaught. I am the Strategic Organisational Development Manager at the Scotland Excel Academy. And in this short video, I'd like to talk about organisational learning and how we can use that to enable performance and long-term success. So this replicates one of the Stay Connected online workshops that was delivered previously. So, kicking it off then, I'm actually reusing this slide from a previous workshop, the one about personal development and self-determination. If we think about this a little, I think it sets the context for thinking about organisational learning and thinking about how we can enable that long-term success. So without covering this in too much detail, since it was covered previously, if we think about self-determination, it's concerning feelings of being socially connected. And it's also about how we relate to ourselves, team members, peers, the wider organisation, including the strategy, the operating plan, and the vision. It comes from the standpoint that we want to feel we contribute to other people and to the group, to the team, to the organisation. Most people look for autonomy in what they do. Don't want to be micromanaged, certainly do want some support when they need it, but they want the autonomy to do the job to the best of their ability and get on with it. Now, not everyone, but most people. When we think about that in terms of the wider self-determination, we're coming to that from the approach of people want to feel they're effective in what they do, that they can master the skills that they need to do the job that they do. But if things get too difficult, or if we perceive things get too difficult, then most of that reduces. If we perceive we're not competent, we're not motivated to engage in that way. If we don't think we can be successful, then we will not engage. And not everyone, some people are complete, I'll rephrase that. Some people want to pursue the biggest challenge they can get, and maybe it's that type of very difficult problem that actually is their motivation. But we're talking about most people at this point, and if we can't satisfy autonomy, competence, and relatedness, then there's usually some less than positive consequences, some negative consequences, let's be fair. That might means people don't engage at best, and they could actually be quite oppositional, confrontational, creating barriers. But when we can satisfy self-determination, people normally engage wholeheartedly. They're driving forward, they're motivated, they want to play their part in that wider strategy and the operating plan. So the suggestion here is that autonomy, competence, and relatedness are actually essential for people to be motivated, to get satisfaction, and to be well physically and mentally. If that doesn't happen, there's kind of complications that happen that people need to deal with. Now, if we can think about that in the context of organisational learning, it actually fits in quite well, because equally self-determination needs to be satisfied for people to be able to effectively learn and apply that learning. So if we think about that, and ultimately learning that we can apply makes us more expert, more capable, more competent, and in turn should improve performance. And if we're all performing optimally, it means that long-term success as individuals and as organisations is more sustainable, is more viable. If we think about that learning then, as we work towards the workplace, and we're specifically thinking about the public sector across Scotland, so people come from school or college or university into work. Some people come from school to college to university and then into work. So there's three parallel paths. By the time we get to work, we've got a certain level of capability, know-how, expertise that we can apply to the jobs that we do. Now, I don't specifically show it in this image, but I do recognise and acknowledge people can come from the private sector into public sector work. So we're just going to class that as work, but people could come with different experiences, or will come with different experiences and potentially different expertise and capability, and it's all valid and it's all welcome. Once we're actually in the workplace, in the working environment, we're doing the job we're paid to do, and therefore work-based learning becomes really quite relevant. It's not always a taught type of scenario, it's not always a structured type of scenario, it's work-based learning as is fit for the individual and as the organisation can facilitate and support. We're working in a pretty complex environment, quite a dynamic environment, whether it's our experiences of the pandemic, which has changed so many things, whether we're taking recommendations and statements from Audit Scotland, who talk about how complex the Scottish public sector is, how it's working in a dynamic and changing environment. It's all very relevant and applicable. And therefore, lifelong learning becomes important because we will need to adapt to the environments we find ourselves in. And those environments are going to change month on month, year on year. Okay, it depends on the scale and the pace of change, but it is going to evolve. I don't mean change from a change management perspective. I mean, things will be fluid, will be dynamic, and for many reasons, nothing will stay static. So lifelong learning so that we can acquire the appropriate knowledge to apply to the current environment and the way the current work practice has evolved is completely needed. And if we're going to do it right, it should be transformative. Transformative in that it changes the way we work for our greater collective value. Okay. If we then think about organisational learning, and I'd like to think about learning as a behaviour, because we can choose to learn or choose not to learn, or we can choose to fully engage or not engage, or so it is actually a behaviour. The parts in grey, if I think about our normal approach to work-based learning or our established typical approach to work-based learning, there are normally a number of training courses in organisations which allow us to be familiar with the organisation, learn the systems, the policies, the procedures, and then we can obviously go and apply that and fulfil our job role. There are often some shadowing opportunities where I can work with someone who's more expert than me, more experienced than me, and I can learn from them. In addition to actual training courses, which we're thinking if they are taught, there could be equivalents of that as being online, where I can log onto the system, there'll be online modules, I can work my way through them, hopefully in an interactive way, and I can learn stuff through self-directed online learning, and I can then go and apply that in my work practice. There could be coaching, there could be mentoring, hopefully there's both, and they're both there, and they're applied at the appropriate times, but there are coaching and mentoring mechanisms that helps develop the people, allows us to learn some more stuff that we can apply in our jobs. And as we're doing all these different things, the intention is we will exploit our capability, applying it to our work to create some value. Whatever that value is, serving our communities, delivering a service, optimising a system, reducing cost, making things more efficient, more productive. It's actually limitless if we can just consider we do what we do to add some value in our appropriate context. And that exploitation, just for the sake of clarity, is a positive thing. It's not a negative context or connotation of exploitation. It's about applying ourselves to deliver value. And that's important because later we'll talk about exploit and explore. If you think about learning as a behaviour in organisational learning, it can be unstructured or structured. If it's structured, it's normally a taught type of exercise. There's a very logical flow. It's relatively fixed. Unstructured could be whatever is needed, and it's normally untaught. So it could be experiential learning. It could be about coach and mentoring. It could be self-directed. It could be an individual finding out what they need as they go. Peer learning should be part of that. Let's not reinvent the wheel. Let's learn from each other where we can. If we've got the right type of attitudes and behaviours to be open to that, then that can really support transformative learning. You're 5 years of experience doing that, and you're doing it extremely well. If I learn from you, I can probably short circuit part of my learning journey, and I can probably substantially benefit from what you've learned along the way. That links us into co-acting, and by co-acting, I'm simply meaning collaborating in a very effective way, in an optimal effective way. So we can share resources and expertise, we can co-create we can co-deliver, we can co-produce. So we're working together to share that learning and expertise. And we can usually do that amongst problem-based learning. We're trying to solve a problem. As we're actively working on a problem, we're also learning what we need to that we don't already know to apply it to the actual problem context. And it could be project-based too. It could be either or. It could be a combination of both. We've created a project team to solve a problem, so there's complete interaction there. So as we all get to the workplace, we're all in the workplace, we're trying to bias this then towards the organisational learning and how we can do this as effectively as we can and how we can do it transformatively. I want to think a little bit about exploit and explore to set the context, to think about some more things. So when we're exploiting, it's business as usual activities. We are conducting routine performance. We're satisfying and meeting our operational objectives. And we're normally using knowledge and expertise that we know and we've known for probably quite a long time. And we're using policies and procedures, standard operating practices that have been in place probably for a long time and have been done many times before by many people. So if we apply that in that way, we're very probable to get a positive outcome, get a quick return, and it's low risk. And most of us are doing that day in, day out, doing it intuitively without really even thinking of it like this. But this is actually, you know, what's happening in the way we're actually supporting our normal business as usual. We can all exploit, and we all do exploit. We all have got the potential to explore, but not everybody is motivated to explore. And let's have a think a bit more thought about exploration to think about that. Exploration is experimental. It's adaptive. It is not focused on business as usual activities or objectives. And it's exploring new opportunities, new ways of working, and it's trying things out. And it might not work. It might fail or only be partially successful. We might invest some time and money and get no return whatsoever. There's a possibility of no immediate return, but there's a possibility of no return if it really completely fails. And not everyone is happy with that. Someone who's very driven about performance and achieving the objectives and getting satisfaction from their role through their performance, exploration can be a complete distraction because nobody can exploit and explore at the same time. Most people can exploit and explore. And in fact, everyone can if they're motivated to do it and have the appropriate expertise. But some people don't want to go to exploration because it just distracts from the routine performance. They might perceive it's got a negative connotation on them that I'm not achieving as much as I used to because I'm busy doing this exploration as well. However, if we're going to learn and learn new ways of doing things, we need to explore it. It's completely essential. But it brings the risk dimension into it as well. That in exploration, we need to deal with uncertainty. And we have to be able to manage that uncertainty. It might not work, it might fail. We might have to pick ourselves up, understand where we got to, post-mortem that, lessons learned, and then go on to another iteration, taking a different approach of how we're still going to try and achieve what we set out to achieve. So we need to be able to tolerate that uncertainty, adapt to it, and be comfortable with that. It's a different approach to risk because the standard risk register approach is completely valid and has got its place, where we look at the probability of something happening and we allocate it a value of X, and we look at the impact it will have if it does happen and allocate it Y. We multiply the two to get a risk rating, and then we think about how we can mitigate that and what our contingencies would be. So a completely valid way of thinking about risk, but that's not an appropriate way to think about risk for exploration, because we wouldn't do it otherwise. The probability of this failing is very high. However, if it does work, the reward and the return and the gain is also very high, but it might be too risky. And for some people, it is too risky, which means they don't want to explore. But we need to explore to solve some of the problems we face: budget restrictions, budget cuts, changes in resources, challenges of the pandemic, austerity, Brexit, potential independence. This will all require exploration to pursue new opportunities, to solve problems, and to pursue new ways of working. So exploration is equally as essential as exploitation. I've left this in from the workshop because I'd like you to think about this as you watch the video. What does this mean to you? What does this mean within your organisation? How much of your time do you spend exploiting and how much do you spend exploring? Is your organisation supportive of exploring? We often talk about the public sector as being risk averse. So what impact does that have on exploration? Because it's risky. Some of it won't work. It definitely won't all work, but future iterations, if we take an appropriate approach, have got a better chance of working. Is there an appetite to support that? How do you deal with risk? And we've talked a bit about that. That's also important. And what about self-determination theory? Do we have all the component parts we need? And is it cohesive? Okay, so let's try and bring that into a work context, thinking specifically about the people and about the place. So if I ask you to look at the image in the top left-hand corner and think about that type of environment. The context here would be back in March 2020, we were all working, or almost all were working in an office environment, face-to-face contact, working collectively, all together. Now we're not. Most of us are working remotely, working from home, working online. So that future environment, the normal way of working is currently different. And some people will suggest the way we're currently working is our new normal, our new norm. And other people say, well, it's not. It's fairly complex, so it's definitely going to evolve. But if you look at that top image, learning as a behaviour, what do we need to learn to get the optimal way of working from our current environment, even if it's interim? And how could we go forward with that? And the more you look at that picture, hopefully the more you see. So online is going to be an increasing element of how we work. And the functionality of the systems hopefully will be good enough that that online experience is very similar or quite close to the face-to-face interaction, although it's unlikely to ever be as good. So from a people aspect, how do we learn to get the best out of us and support the organisation for that long-term performance? And from a place aspect, from that work environment aspect, it's the same question. What kind of things do we need to put in place? How can we adapt that work environment, whether it's face-to-face, online, whether it's blended? How do we learn what we need to learn to create the best environment we can, to give people satisfaction, to think about self-determination theory and how important that is, to give people the autonomy to work, to help them develop the competence, to help them sustain all of that and help them relate to, I'm contributing to my contribution, the team, the people, the organisation, even though I'm working remotely. So psychologically, this is actually very important and it's probably never been more relevant. So we need to think about that going forward. How we might do that then, there's a model here to think about, and it's one that we've talked about before in the How Do We Do More with Less workshop. I'm just replicating this here, but organisational learning can be quite involved and it certainly can be quite complex. There are many variables. So this model, which is actually called absorptive capacity, can be extremely useful. So if I'm working as part of your team and we're having some problems in solving the task that we've got, or it's the kind of task we don't know how to approach, either or we're thinking, well, what do we need to know to be able to give ourselves a good chance of success to achieve whatever we're trying to achieve? So in this concept, it says, well, where do we acquire knowledge from? And then once we've got the knowledge, how do we make it fit for purpose for our organisation and get something that's useful that we can go and exploit? Now in the next slide, we'll get into more detail, so I'm keeping that quite concise. And most probably that's a combination of exploiting and exploring. And in the whole context of organisational learning, there's a concept here which can help guide us and help support us go through this process so that we learn stuff that gives the organisation the best chance of success. And that's effectively what I'm trying to talk about here. Slightly different diagram, but it's the same thing. So where do we identify and acquire information from? and it's normally thought to be external sources. Because if we don't know it, if there's stuff that we say we need to learn about that to be able to do this, if it existed within the organisation internally, then we'd be accessing it. But it is possible some of our team members and our peers have got expertise that we don't know of. So it could come from internally, but it's most probably going to come externally. So we're going to acquire that information, that knowledge from other sources across our network. Subject matter experts, could be college, could be university, could be any source that you can identify would be of use to you with that information and that knowledge. Once we have that knowledge, we have to think about it in terms of analyse it, interpret it, and understand that acquired information. Now, if you've been to one of the previous workshops or watched one of these previous videos, the information-based decision making is very applicable here. How will we interpret that data, information, knowledge? And we probably interpret it differently. At least there'll be some differences amongst a group of people. And that's a good thing, because we've got that diversity of view. What's important though is we then bring that together and we debate that to come to a consensus of opinion and we can go forward with. The other part of this is in our organisational context, what's fit for purpose. It might be too risky for us as an organisation. We might not value that way of working. Maybe we tried that before and it failed and it was quite painful and we don't want to do that again. Maybe that's just a bit too ambitious for us. You know, I've only mentioned a few variables, but you know, there's a lot in there. But the point is, let's analyse and interpret it, working towards developing something which is fit for purpose for us and for our organisation. And that then translates or progresses into the transformation aspect. So we've all got existing knowledge and we've all just learned new stuff, or some people have learned new stuff and through assimilation have talked to us about it and we've all interpreted it and we've got to an understanding of that acquired information. So we've got existing knowledge and we've got the new knowledge and we've got an awareness of an organisational context, how ambitious we are, how we normally work, what we're up for, what we're not up for. So we transform that, a combination of our existing knowledge and the new knowledge with an awareness of our work environment, and we transform that into something which is useful for us in our context, in our organisation, pursuing those problems and or opportunities. So now that we've got to that point, we go and do something about it. We implement that, we exploit it, we apply that acquired transformed knowledge for our greater good. Now it says here commercial gain, which it definitely can be. It could be solving a problem, creating value for a community, being more productive, avoiding cost. It's the appropriate way we're creating value. Now this model of organisational learning is extremely useful if we apply it effectively, but it underpins us going forward now because things will change in an environment. It's complex and it's dynamic. We're changing all the time. We have different motivations than we had 6 months ago, etc., etc. So this is always evolving around us. Strategies are changing, so they're influencing operating plans, so they're influencing some of my tasks and what I'm responsible for. People are leaving, people are joining, people are getting promoted to bigger and better things. All that's moving all the time. So we should continually be thinking about, if we don't know something, where we acquire the knowledge from and how we work through the process of making it fit for purpose for our organisation, interpreting it and combining it with what we already know to give us something that's useful for us and go and exploit and implementing it. And then we should also think about how we embed some of that in our business as usual practices. So the new stuff we've just learned, we've exploited it, applied that knowledge, implemented a new way of working, we've got that to work better than the current way of working, and now we adopt that as our business as usual. We embed that in our practice, and then we'll look to be progressive and move on. And most probably we've got other things we need to solve that are waiting on us, or the environment has changed, or our customers' needs have changed, or the budget's changed. You know, you get the idea. There's many things changing around us where we actually have to go through another iteration of the cycle. Maybe iteration is the wrong word because that suggests something we previously worked on. It could be, or it could be something completely new. As we learn this new stuff and apply it and create something useful, how do we distribute that across the organisation? You know, if we're benefiting from it, probably others will as well. And if we're thinking about the Scottish public sector context, what about the other 31 local authorities? Would they benefit from it? Or would they take what we've done and go through that same process and assimilate that, interpret it to something fit for purpose for them, apply that to their current working practices, what they already know, creating a combination of knowledge that they can go and apply? And if that's better than what they currently do, then we're all winning. How we interpret that information and that kind of cycle is our organisational learning, and how we then actually get that embedded in the organisational memory is equally important. You know, once we've put all that effort in and created something of value, as it remains valid, if other things don't change and cause us to have to evolve it, then how do we remember that? And when you move on to bigger and better things, or when you go and do different tasks, how do we ensure that knowledge is vested in an organisation so that it can be reapplied and re-implemented when it's needed? And we would usually talk about where we've got knowledge management systems and we've got learning management systems, and we can retain all of that in there, and we can certainly save it there. We can save it in network drives, etc., etc. But a lot of this is about the people. So how do we ensure that's retained in the people and all the people have got access to it? You know, it's not just about the systems, it's very much about the people dynamics, self-determination, ability, motivation, opportunity. It's all of that to ensure we can sustain that as we go forward. Okay, again, I've kept the exercise in because I'd ask you to think about this as you watch the video. In a previous workshop, we talked about data, information and knowledge and wisdom. We touched on data, information and knowledge earlier in this video. We all start with data, usually. The facts and figures, the undigestible facts. And we apply what we know to that and interpret that in a context that we've chosen, in a processing mechanism that we've chosen, and we create information. But we might do that differently. Different people might take different approaches. So we interpret the data in different ways, creating different information. And we'd have to recreate that socially each time we look at that with a group of people. And we can move on to knowledge, where we're looking at things in a bit more detail and we're translating that information into knowledge. The wisdom part of it suggests when we look at a situation and we analyse something and we're trying to solve a problem, then that's the mechanism we all use and we're taught to do, and it can fix some stuff. It's got its value and it can actually make some progress. The wisdom part of it says, but now look at that in terms of the consequences of applying that knowledge and the consequences of taking that course of action or making that decision, and thinking about that future state. Well, if we do that, that and that, this is what will happen. Or if we did it that way and that way and that way, it's actually this will happen. And it's been able to almost foresee and predict whether the consequences are good or bad. We can understand what it's likely to be, and that's the wisdom part of it, so that we can act in the appropriate way. I'd also ask you to think about what are your sources of information. And if you think about your network, the organisations and the people that you interact with, where are your sources of information? And if they are external, where would they come from? And what about within your social structure? How do you analyse and interpret? Do you debate this stuff? Get to a consensus of opinion? Everyone's never going to agree. Everyone's never going to completely buy in. But can you constructively manage the differences to get enough consensus of opinion? We've got a bit of momentum we can move forward with. How do you then use that knowledge that you gain internally and transform that into something that's fit for purpose for you? And then, is that combined, transformed knowledge applied and exploited? How is it exploited? What about exploration? Do you have an appetite for that? Does your team, does the organisation, are we risk averse? Are we too busy to explore because we need to exploit and create the value? And if we are, how are we going to solve the current and future problems if the existing ways of working are not fit for purpose? Because we need to learn new stuff to allow us to solve the problems. If you think about wicked problems, and many of our wicked problems have been about for decades, we've invested millions, if not billions of pounds into trying to solve them, and we've not always succeeded. Unless we can explore and find better ways of working, we're not going to solve them, because the current way of working hasn't solved these problems. Are very complex, they're quite deep-rooted, it's very difficult to know how to approach them. So unless we can explore, we're not going to solve these. They're going to continue to cost us millions. So the organisational learning approaches gives us chances to impact that. Not suggesting for a moment we can solve them 100%, but we might be able to solve some parts of it. Or working in different ways, we might be able to solve big chunks of it and ultimately resolve a problem. There are going to be more wicked problems. The pandemic is a wicked problem. Regardless, and I don't mean this politically, but Brexit is going to bring changes, complex changes, and that's a wicked problem. Hopefully we get it to work really well, but if we don't, we're going to live with the consequences. And it's no political statement whatsoever, it's not judgmental, it's just that it's going to be a different environment. Our dynamic environment has changed, and we need to learn new ways of working in that environment and exploit what we can for maximum value and solve some of the problems that we encounter. Is there a difference between how you learn and how the organisation learns? And what does that mean? Is that a case of trial and error? Is that a case in some quite deep-rooted ways of working that the organisation wishes to work? Is that a facilitator and enabler to us learning new stuff to solve the problems, to create new opportunities, to pursue new opportunities, to react to an environment, or do they work against each other? And what can we do about that? People need to be open to pursue a model like absorptive capacity to give it a go. And we need enough success to demonstrate to get value that we continue to do that. Or if that's not palatable to our organisation or to us as individuals, then we find a different way of doing it. It's not the only model out there, it's not the only way of learning, but I think it does capture a lot of the components of our environment, and it gives us the freedom to pursue it in different ways. And it very much brings the people into it and thinking about the different interpretations and our different expertise, and then we can combine what we know with new stuff to give us something which is more valuable. Okay, so the transformative learning, lifelong learning, can very much be supported through self-determination, absorptive capacity. We have to have an appetite to pursue some of this. We have to be motivated. We have to feel that collective belonging. The social constructions have to be right. Therefore, the work environment needs to be right. There's a lot of components in there, and it can get quite complex. So we're trying to break it down. That's why I try to take them one at a time. There's definitely interaction between the two. If I don't have the autonomy to do what I need to do, I probably can't go and acquire new knowledge. If I don't have sufficient competence, or if I don't perceive I have, how can I assimilate and transform and create something which is more valuable? If I can't relate to why we're even doing this learning, let's just keep doing it the way we currently do it, it's fine. If I can't relate to the need to do things differently, I am not going to engage in any of that. If we've got people in our teams who are at that point and are not engaging, they could be the most expert people. We absolutely need their expertise and need their contribution. But if they can't relate to it, they won't buy in and they won't be motivated to play their part. Risk can be a big thing, can be a big enabler, can be a big detractor. We can't explore if we've got a very strong risk aversion approach. And we must explore if we're going to learn new stuff and apply new stuff to create new opportunities and solve problems, both current and future. We know that we work in a dynamic environment because we live that. We know it because of stuff's happening around us, and we know it because of where the country is heading as a nation with some of the future opportunities and challenges. So this is one way of actually facilitating some of that for a greater good. Okay, if we think nationally then, some Scottish Government data says there's 561,300 people employed in the Scottish public sector. Massive number of people. 245,000 of those people are employed in local government across the 32 local authorities. And then there's almost 82,000 people in the third sector, which supports the Scottish public sector. So we've got hundreds of thousands of people working across our country. I wanted to try and use this slide to get you to think about things and hopefully reflect after the video. The bottom left is that new norm. Whatever that new norm is, that we can play a part in building and creating and facilitating to work in the most optimal way that we can create together through learning. We've got 32 local authorities, and that map shows the headquarters across the country. There are socio-demographic differences, there are geographical differences. The needs of a rural or island community are quite different from a city centre community, but there's a lot of commonality in our problems as well. We're facing a lot of the same type of problems. Yes, there are some differences, but I'm going to suggest there's more things common than there are different. So how can we work together? How can we learn together to enable performance and long-term success? Can we share our visions, share our strategies and expertise? Can we share resources and budgets? Can we share some people hours? Can we each put in some money to actually have a collective effort of going and working on some problems, of exploring some problems? That means we could co-act. We can collaborate in the most effective way that we can figure out together. We can co-create things with our combined expertise. We can co-produce some content, tools, models, experience, and we can co-deliver. 32 local authorities, they will all need to be delivering, for example, leadership and management. They will all need to be delivering any other discipline you want to think about. Or can we actually co-act where we take the best bits of expertise and work together? We can all save some hours, we can all save some costs, and we probably can deliver it more effectively by the sum of our parts is greater. Self-determination theory, absorptive capacity, I'm going to suggest underpins a lot of that. As does the vision coming from our leaders, from our most senior leaders, the vision that they create. How we communicate with each other should be inspirational, should capture our attention, and it should intellectually stimulate us to go through some of this learning that we can then go and apply. So there's quite a bit to think about in there too. There's an opportunity to work collectively and work nationally, pooling resources, working together in a co-acting way. If we were in the workshop, I'd ask you to do this. I'd ask you to use Lewin's force-field analysis. How are we going to enable performance and long-term success? Any of the blue arrows conceptually moving that column from the left to the right. So that's enabling us in performance and long-term success. Anything preventing us doing that is a detractor working from right to left, moving that column conceptually to the left. And there's a balance of forces here. So it's exhaustive. We list everything we can think of. You can do all the enablers if you want. You can do all the detractors, or you can switch between sides. But you give it a period of time working as a group until you can't think of anything more. And it builds up a picture quite quickly of what's at play in your environment, with the type of people you're working with what you're facing in your own context. You then can add a bit of self-prioritization to that. It's called democracy. You've got 5 blue ticks and you've got 5 red ticks of every individual that's involved in the exercise. And you then say, that one there's so important to me, I'm putting 3 of my ticks on it. And I'm putting 1 in that and 1 in that. And I'm going to do that for each side. Or I might put 1 tick in 5 different things if I want. And what that does as a group of people is it builds up what's important to you. So almost self-prioritizes, because you add up the ticks and you say, well, that one got 20 ticks, that one got 14, that one got 32, and it's saying that's what you think is important as a group. And if you're representative of the wider organisation, then that should be representative of what we should go and work on. So it's a very good approach to scoping out what's at play in your environment, and especially when you don't know the answer or you don't know which route to take. The outcomes of that could then be applied to what knowledge you have to acquire to actually go through that whole process. And equally, this is not a one-off. We will do this again in the future because it's dynamic, things changed. Or once we've solved some of the problems, we'll have a different environment to look at, and we might come back and say, well, we actually worked on the top 2 things there and the top 2 there. What about the other ones? Should we actually go and actually work on them now, or should we do the exercise again to see if there's any things at play that we didn't see back then, or weren't visible to us back then, but maybe they are now that we've solved some of the problem, or we've progressed some from where we last were. Okay, I'm giving the URL for the Academy, and I'm giving you a graphic from the homepage in the Academy. There's a lot of information in the public domain, which you're absolutely welcome to access and use. If you're on some of our programmes, you'll have a secure area, but there is a lot in the public domain. And if you wanted to share any practice, there's provision of doing that through the Academy as well, and you would certainly get the credit for all of that work. So it's an opportunity to share some stuff and a bit of peer learning between us. I've listed any of the literature that I've used, so if you wanted to verify it or you wanted to read more deeply, you've got all the references there. And I've listed my own contact details. If there's anything you want to discuss, question, debate in the future, or if there's opportunities for us to work together with the Academy, we'd be delighted to speak to you about that. So thank you for listening, and I hope to work with you in the future. Take care.